right, so today we're taking a deep dive into something that you might have seen like snippets of in the news.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Captagon trade.
Oh, yeah.
Now, we're talking Middle East,
Right.
Syria specifically.
Hmm.
But the reach of this thing,
Yeah.
way beyond borders.
It is global.
Think global.
It is a global problem, for sure.
And it's not just another drug crisis.
Right.
This is tangled up with war economics, power plays,
Yes, it's
the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, it throws a spotlight on the dark side of globalization.
Yeah.
You know how a conflict in one corner of the world
Yeah.
can create ripples that reach every continent?
Absolutely.
And what we're going to try to do today is untangle how this seemingly simple drug
Right.
has become both a weapon of war and a financial lifeline for a regime that is teetering on the brink.
We're working with a single article today,
Okay.
but it's packed with detail.
Okay, great.
So are you ready to unravel how Captagon went from a treatment for ADHD to, bankrolling a narco state?
Yeah, that's a really fascinating story.
Because the journey is a wild one.
It really underscores how even with good intentions, sometimes solutions can morph into problems.
Yeah.
Captagon was actually developed back in the 60s,
Okay.
meant to help people with narcolepsy.
Interesting.
And ironically, to help people focus better.
Oh, wow.
And so,
So a drug to make you alert and focused ends up fueling a war.
that's right.
That's a plot twist I didn't see coming.
Precisely. You see the very properties that made it appealing for medical use. The stimulation, the euphoria, the ability to push through fatigue. They also made it ripe for abuse,
Oh, yeah.
particularly in a chaotic war zone.
Right.
And by the 80s, most of the world had banned Captagon.
Okay.
But as we often see, banning something doesn't erase demand.
Right. Especially when you have a conflict like the Syrian civil war,
Absolutely.
where everyone is desperate for an edge.
Yeah.
Our article paints a pretty stark picture.
Mm.
Rebel groups,
Mhm.
militias, they all saw Captagon as a way to keep their fighters going.
That's right.
I mean, can you imagine needing to stay awake and alert for days on end in a war zone?
It's a bleak reality, and it's precisely this demand that the Assad regime capitalized on.
Oh, wow.
What started as opportunistic use by various factions transformed into something far more sinister. A state-sponsored enterprise.
Wow.
And you have to remember, Syria's economy was and still is reeling from years of conflict and sanctions.
Right.
They were in dire need of a financial lifeline.
Yeah.
And tragically, Captagon became their golden ticket.
Hold on a golden ticket. How lucrative are we talking here?
Billions.
Wow.
It's estimated that the Captagon trade generates billions of dollars annually for the Syrian regime.
Wow.
To put that into perspective, that's potentially more than their entire legal export economy.
Oh, wow.
It's become their primary source of income, allowing them to circumvent international sanctions and essentially thumb their nose at the global community.
That's mind-blowing. So it's not just about controlling territory.
Right.
It's about controlling this incredibly lucrative drug trade.
It is. It is.
They've turned a war-torn country into, I don't even know what to call it,
A narco state.
a narco state.
A narco state, a term usually reserved for places like Latin America,
Right.
but one that's becoming increasingly apt for Syria.
Yeah.
And the implications are terrifying, not just for the region, but for the entire world.
So help me understand this. If Syria is under sanctions, how are they getting this stuff out there? And where is it all ending up?
That's where the ingenuity or perhaps the desperation of this operation comes into play.
Okay.
We're talking industrial-scale production in regime-controlled areas.
Wow.
Pills churned out by the billions
Wow.
and then smuggled out through incredibly elaborate networks.
Okay.
Think shipping containers filled with pomegranates. Only the pomegranates are stuffed with Captagon.
What?
Hidden compartments and machinery, you name it, they've probably tried it.
It's straight out of a spy thriller. But this isn't fiction. This is real life, and it's
Yeah.
having real-world consequences.
Yeah.
Where are these shipments ending up?
Well, the primary market is right next door in the Gulf states. Saudi Arabia, in particular, has a huge problem with Captagon addiction,
A what?
particularly amongst young people.
Yep.
But it doesn't stop there.
Right.
We're seeing major seizures in Jordan, Lebanon, even as far away as Europe and Southeast Asia.
Wow.
This stuff is being shipped everywhere.
So not only are they flooding the region with this drug,
Yeah.
they're effectively exporting their problems too.
Right.
But if it's so widespread, why haven't we heard more about it?
That's the chilling part.
Yeah.
For years, the international community has been focused on The Syrian civil war, the refugee crisis,
Yeah.
the humanitarian disaster.
Right.
The Captagon trade was almost a side note, a
Yes.
symptom of the larger chaos.
Right.
But now as the drug has spread beyond the region, as it started showing up in Europe and elsewhere, people are starting to pay attention. The problem is by the time you notice a problem like this, it's often too late.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like a slow-burning fuse that's finally reaching the dynamite.
Yeah.
We're talking about a public health crisis, organized crime, political instability, all wrapped up in one tiny pill.
So what do we do?
Right.
How do you even begin to tackle something this massive and this deeply entrenched? It's not like we can just roll in and shut down their factories, right?
Today, a direct military intervention is highly unlikely, especially given the complex geopolitical landscape in Syria.
Yeah.
But the question of responsibility of the global community's role in addressing this is more pressing than ever.
I'm thinking about those sanctions we talked about.
Yeah.
Are those not working? Or are they just not enough?
Sanctions are a double-edged sword.
Right.
They can cripple an economy, but they can also hurt ordinary people and inadvertently strengthen the very regime they're meant to weaken.
Right.
In Syria's case, broad economic sanctions have definitely taken their toll. But the regime has adapted, using the Captagon trade as a way to circumvent them.
So what do we just hit them with more sanctions? Or is there another way?
Some experts argue for more targeted sanctions, focusing on individuals and companies directly involved in the Captagon trade.
Huh.
The idea is to cut off the head of the snake, so to speak, without hurting the Syrian people any further.
But how do you even identify those individuals and companies when everything is shrouded in secrecy?
Right.
I mean, these aren't exactly publicly traded companies we're talking about.
It takes intelligence gathering, international cooperation, and a lot of digging.
Yeah.
Financial institutions, shipping companies, chemical manufacturers. There's a whole network of players involved, and unraveling it requires a coordinated effort.
Okay, so say we manage to hit them where it hurts financially.
Mm-hmm.
Does that solve the problem?
That's a great question.
Because I'm guessing those factories don't just magically shut down and everyone finds a new legal job.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Targeting the financial side is important, but it's only one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
We also have to address the underlying conditions that allow this trade to thrive in the first place.
And what are those? Poverty, desperation, lack of opportunity.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Remember, Syria has been ravaged by war for over a decade.
Right.
Their economy is in ruins, unemployment is rampant, and people are desperate to survive.
Yeah.
In that kind of environment, it's not hard to see why someone might turn to the Captagon trade, even if it means risking their life or ending up in prison.
It's that classic cycle of poverty and crime only on a national scale.
Exactly.
So how do you break that cycle?
That's where the idea of alternative development comes in.
Okay.
It's a long-term strategy that focuses on creating sustainable livelihoods for people in Captagon-producing areas.
Okay.
Think agricultural development, vocational training, small business loans, anything that gives people a viable alternative to the drug trade.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But I can't help but think it sounds a bit idealistic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're talking about a country where the government is actively involved in this trade. Are they really going to sit back and let us undermine their golden goose?
It's a fair point.
Yeah.
Implementing any kind of development program in Syria would be incredibly challenging.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially given the current political climate.
Yeah.
It would require cooperation from the regime, which is, to put it mildly, unlikely.
So we're back to square one.
Wow.
No easy answers. Just a tangled mess of geopolitical maneuvering and human suffering.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
While a full-scale development program might be off the table for now, there are still things that can be done.
Okay.
We can support grassroots organizations that are already working on the ground, providing humanitarian aid and economic opportunities to vulnerable communities.
Right.
We can pressure the regime through diplomatic channels, making it clear that their involvement in the Captagon trade is unacceptable.
And we can shine a light on this issue, right?
Absolutely.
Because I get the feeling this is something that a lot of people, even those who follow international news, aren't really aware of.
Absolutely. Raising awareness is crucial. The more people understand the scale and the impact of this trade, the more pressure there will be on governments and international organizations to take action.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the complexity of it all, especially when you see the human cost.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't just about numbers and statistics. It's
Yeah.
about real people, real families whose lives are being destroyed by this drug.
And that's what we have to remember.
Yeah.
The fight against the Captagon trade isn't just about geopolitics or economics. It's about people.
Right.
It's about giving those people hope, about offering them a chance at a better future.
So where do we go from here? What's the next step? What can people do if they want to make a difference? Feels like we've been going down a rabbit hole, and it keeps getting deeper.
Yeah, it does.
But you know what?
Yeah.
Sometimes those are the journeys that teach you the most.
I agree. This isn't just about one drug or one country.
Right.
It's a stark reminder that we live in a world where everything is connected, where a conflict in one place can fuel a public health crisis on another continent.
And it's easy to get lost in the big picture. The geopolitics, the economics, the war on drugs.
Right.
But at the end of the day, this is about people.
Yeah.
About individual lives being shattered.
That's the thread we have to keep pulling on, you know?
Right.
The human cost. Imagine being a parent in Saudi Arabia watching your child succumb to Captagon addiction.
Yeah.
Or a farmer in Syria forced to grow drug crops because there's simply no other way to feed your family.
It's heavy stuff.
It is.
And you're right, those personal stories, those are the ones that make it real,
Yeah.
that make it impossible to ignore.
Right.
So circling back to my earlier question,
Right.
what can we actually do?
Yeah.
Where do we even begin to make a difference?
Well, awareness is a powerful tool.
Okay.
The more people know about this issue, the more pressure there will be on governments to address it. You can share this deep dive, talk to your friends, write to your elected officials, make some noise.
It's like you said earlier, shining a light on the dark corners.
Exactly.
Because sometimes just exposing something is enough to start the process of change.
That's right.
But what about on a more practical level?
Yeah.
Are there organizations working on this that we can support?
Absolutely. There are groups doing incredible work in Syria and surrounding countries,
Okay.
providing humanitarian aid, supporting refugees, working to create economic opportunities. We'll make sure to include some links in the show notes so you can learn more and if you're able to contribute.
And I think it's important to remember that this isn't a hopeless situation.
Yeah.
Complex, yes.
Uh-huh.
Challenging, absolutely. But there are things being done, there are people fighting back, and there's always hope.
Exactly. It's easy to get caught up in the doom and gloom, to feel paralyzed by the scale of the problem.
Yeah.
But cynicism won't solve anything. We need action. We need engagement. We need to believe that change is possible.
So let me get this straight. You're telling me that even though we've uncovered this whole web of corruption, this global network of drug trafficking, that there's still a chance to make a difference?
Think of it this way. Every complex problem is just a collection of smaller problems.
Okay.
And every one of those smaller problems has a potential solution. Maybe it's supporting a local organization working to rehabilitate addicts. Maybe it's advocating for stricter sanctions on those involved in the trade. Maybe it's simply educating yourself and spreading the word. Every little bit helps.
I like that. Breaking it down into bite-sized pieces. Because when you look at the big picture, it's easy to feel overwhelmed.
Right.
But if we each focus on what we can do, on the areas where we can have an impact, then maybe, just maybe, we can start to shift the tide.
That's the spirit. It's not about grand gestures. It's about consistent effort. And who knows, maybe one day we'll look back on this deep dive and say, that's where it started. That's where we decided to do something to be a part of the solution.
Well, on that note, I think we've given our listener plenty to chew on. This hasn't been your average deep dive, that's for sure. But it's been an important one. And like you said, maybe it's the spark that ignites something bigger.
That's what we hope for. So to our listener out there, we leave you with this. Don't let this information just sit there. Let it fuel your curiosity, your compassion, your desire to make a difference. Because the world needs more people who care, who are willing to dig deep and ask the tough questions. And who knows, maybe you'll be the one to uncover the next piece of the puzzle, the one that helps us finally break this cycle.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, stay curious.